Tonight on The Readout.
If you're the president of the United States, you can declassify just by saying it's declassified, even by thinking about it, because you're sending it to Mar-a-Lago or to wherever you're sending it. And there doesn't have to be a process.
If you laughed at the former twice impeached president said you could declassify with your mind, you might have missed that he also said, quote, wherever you're sending it, because we're learning that the DOJ believes Trump still has documents he shouldn't have somewhere. Plus, Putin's back is up against the wall. He's losing and facing dissent from a high-ranking insider. And President Biden weighed in with a chilling assessment of the threat to the world. And all the Republicans rallying to Herschel Walker's defense must have known it could get worse, and, well, tonight it did. We'll bring you the new reporting. Good evening. I'm Jason Johnson in for Joy Reid, and we begin the readout tonight with another stunning development in the investigation into Donald Trump's handling of government records. New reporting says that even after 18 months, multiple requests from National Archives, a federal subpoena, and an FBI search of his Florida estate, the Department of Justice believes the former president still has not returned all the documents he took after leaving the White House. NBC News confirmed reports that the department's top counterintelligence official, Jay Bratt, recently communicated these concerns to Trump's lawyers. It's not clear whether the DOJ has new evidence to suggest he is still holding on to classified material, or if it's just a suspicion based on the 48 empty envelopes with, classified markings they found at Mar-a-Lago. But it comes as another report is raising questions about one batch of documents Trump did return before leaving Washington, that being material related to the FBI's 2016 probe into Russia's links to the Trump campaign. ABC News reports that the batch was in such disarray when Trump gave it back, the DOJ said they couldn't tell which of the documents were the classified ones even a year later. But even more jarring, Trump tried to make the documents public the night before he left office, issuing a declassification memo. It's almost like he knew that he can't just justify declassifying anything he wants to with his mind. And then he was also secretly meeting with conservative writer John Solomon, who was allowed to review the documents. But for reasons that are still not clear to anyone, and to the great frustration of Trump and his political allies, none were ever officially released. Joining me now to discuss all of this is John Brennan, former CIA director and MSNBC senior national security analyst, and Charles Coleman, former prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst. Charles, I'll start with you. I just want to get into the legal parts of this, because this is the thing that always seems crazy to me. If the federal government says, give me what's in your pockets, and you don't give them what's in your pockets, why can't they just arrest you? Like, just explain this to me like I'm six. Why can't the Department of Justice just arrest Donald Trump right now for not turning over documents that he has no right to have at this particular point? Explain that to me.
Well, Jason, that's a very straightforward question. I'm going to do my best to give you a straightforward answer, and you and all the viewers who may be wondering the exact same thing. The answer is probable cause. The DOJ and Merrick Garland would have to be able to articulate with reasonable certainty that a crime has been committed by the fact that this individual has these documents in their possession, or that they know with great certainty that he likely still has something left. And I think that the DOJ is proceeding very carefully about making those allegations in the court of law before they know with a higher level of certainty that that is the case. But that's the issue. The issue is that they need to be able to establish probable cause that a crime has occurred. And at this point, they don't necessarily know that they can do that, or they don't feel confident in their ability to do that, and they're not necessarily certain which of the numerous violations that we've seen so far that they're looking to charge Donald Trump under. And so because of that, that's likely why we have not seen an arrest or something move forward with respect to an indictment and prosecution of Donald Trump. It is about deciding where there is the strongest aspect of probable cause and to what law they want that to apply.
I insist that if I left my job at Verizon, Walmart, or Chipotle with bank records and didn't bring them back, I'd probably be in handcuffs right now. But that's fine. Former Director Brennan, here's the other question that I have, and this is what always occurs to me when we talk about this story that's been going on for several weeks now about all these documents. The fact that Trump had these documents, some have been turned over, some we believe he still has. What is the sort of range of dangers that the United States and our allies' security apparatuses are in right now because we don't have an accounting of all sorts of classified and possibly semi-classified material? What is the ongoing danger we're facing right now because of these shenanigans with the former president?
Well, Jason, it's clear from the photos and from the reporting that's come out is that these documents at Mar-a-Lago that were illegally moved and retained there contain some of the most highly sensitive, highly restrictive intelligence that the U.S. government holds. It's unknown what exactly is in those documents, but when I was in government, I know what some of those programs involve, and some very sensitive programs. And so there could be some very exquisite, sensitive technical collection systems or human sources that provided us insight into what an adversary is doing or what's going on somewhere around the globe that has put these assets, human as well as technical, at potentially great risk, which is why it is incumbent upon the intelligence community and the FBI to do as thorough an investigation as possible so that they can take measures to mitigate whatever damage or danger there is out there right now. But the fact that Trump and his lawyers continue to proceed with all of these delaying tactics really has prevented the FBI from doing the investigation, I think, that is necessary in order to protect our national security interests.
You know, I got to say, Charles, there appears to be a rift going on right now, according to the New York Times. So the outreach from the Department of Justice prompted a rift among Mr. Trump's lawyers about how to respond. One camp counseling a cooperative approach that would include bringing in an outside firm to conduct a further search for documents, and another advising Mr. Trump to maintain a more combative posture. The more combative camp, the people briefed on the matter, said won out. Charles, here's the issue that I have here. You said that this requires sort of probable cause, and he went with the camp that's decided to be more combative. We already know that these are documents that he didn't necessarily have the right to have. We already know that these are documents that he misplaced and did not use properly. They say that some of them came back in such damaged and confused form. We didn't even know what was what. They were covered with, Big Mac stains and coffee stains and everything else like that. All this kind of nonsense. Isn't there something where either former President Trump or any of his allies who may have also seen this information can be held accountable for just damaging national security records? Like, I don't understand why we're having this conversation about how he gets to decide when he wants to come in and answer to laws that would immediately apply to the rest of us.
Well, that's an interesting question, Jason, and it reminds me of something that I learned early on in law school several years ago, and that is the law is what is boldly asserted and plausibly maintained. I'll say that again. The law is what is boldly asserted and plausibly maintained, and it is very clear that based off of the competing Trump camps of lawyers, that they are making some really bold assertions around Trump's ability to have these documents in his possession. And they believe that through the courts, whether it takes a day, a month, a week, a year, or however long, that they are going to be able to plausibly maintain that. And so I think that's where they're hanging their hat. That's where you're seeing this take place. The danger, and you hit the nail right on the head, is that at some point, particularly for those people who are in the know and know factually that Donald Trump had things in his possession that he was asked to turn over by the National Archives and then asked to turn over by the FBI, and that he did not turn over to the Department of Justice, the danger is that at some point, those individuals do become liable, which is why, if you notice, there has been a reticence on behalf of his attorneys throughout this entire process to make hard and fast commitments as to what was allegedly declassified, if anything, and or commit to the fact that Donald Trump no longer has any of these documents in his possession, because they know that making those representations, especially for those people who may know otherwise and be informed as to otherwise, that has actual penalties and consequences for them as well.
Former Director Brennan, so one of the things that I think is also overlooked sometimes in the far-right response to this, and sometimes the public at large doesn't recognize, Trump owns a lot of properties, right? It's not just Mar-a-Lago. He also owns the Trump Tower penthouse. He owns the Trump National Golf Club in Bedminster. He owns the Trump Park Avenue. He has a lot of properties all around the country, and he owns hotels that are outside of the United States. From a security perspective, do all of those properties need to be locked down at this point? I mean, do they all need to have yellow tape around them? Because it's very likely in the weeks and weeks and weeks, almost at this point, 18 months, of stalling that Trump has done, he might be moving packages back and forth, and we could be playing whack-a-mole for years as they continue to possibly sell these documents or have them in the hands of individuals who would be a danger to national security.
Well, Jason, in many respects, it's a nightmare because we know that Donald Trump never believed that government rules and regulations and policies and practices applied to him. He would just do what he wanted to do. Also, it is my clear understanding that the security practices that usually govern the handling of very sensitive classified intelligence at the White House, basically those practices were abandoned during his administration. It's clear from the way that these documents were just intermingled with other things when the FBI was able to retrieve them, that there was no practice whatsoever in terms of trying to understand, where the documents are and what records there might be. So, and we know that these were found at Mar-a-Lago, but I think your point is a very apt one, which is what else might be out there, not just at Mar-a-Lago, but also in some of these other properties that Trump owns. That's why I know that the intelligence community is really trying its very best to get as much insight as quickly as possible into the range of documents, the intelligence that might have been exposed and compromised, because as you pointed out earlier, many aspects of our national security might be hanging in the balance.
Charles, I want to make sure that we hone in on this as well, because of the sort of inappropriate and unprofessional and quite frankly dangerous, as former Director Bridges pointed out, way in which these documents have been handled by the Trump administration. There is a need for haste on the part of the DOJ. Is there any sort of concern that this absolutely unnecessarily, and I will say cautious, borderline cowardly approach to prosecuting this president continues to open the door for other people in his administration to abuse these former documents? Because it seems to me that the longer this takes, the more emboldened they are, and the less likely we are to have them turn over additional documentation, let alone the continued risk that we might have.
I think that may be a little bit of a reach. I think that people who may try to assume that level of cover, not being Donald Trump and having the resources that Donald Trump has at his disposal, are taking a very serious gamble and are really testing the DOJ in a way that I would not advise. I won't even advise Donald Trump to test the DOJ in the way that he is. The story won't be told until we see what happens with Merrick Garland. And that's really where we will see how methodical, or to use your words, how cowardly the DOJ is doing and proceeding in this way. A lot of times with prosecutors, one of the things that we have to understand is that it is unusual for us to have this amount of insight into any investigation that the federal government is conducting in a criminal matter. We usually do not even know this. And in this case, there's only but so much that we do know. I only say that because there are years that investigations go on. And in this case, it's gonna take until the conclusion of the matter before we know the full story about what exactly DOJ and Merrick Garland are doing.
Thank you, Charles Coleman. Director John Brennan is staying with me.